darlings, welcome back to the second part of the how to make a JSK video. We have now decided on the design of the dress, and also we have the pattern ready. So obviously you need to cut the pieces from your fabric and also from your lining if you want to add that there too. I only have just ordinary sewing machine, so I don't have a serger, but if you do, you can use that too to make the edges extra neat and clean. I am going to use a zigzag stitch, which is basically just doing the same thing, but it's not as pretty as the serged edge. I think we can just head right into sewing the dress, and we will see in the end of this video again.
Start off by pinning the lacing in place. Try to place the ribbons as even as possible for a pretty finish. Then top stitch the ribbons in place. Next we move on to the bust dart. Mark the points of the dart with pins on both sides. Fold the notches together right sides against each other and pin in place. Then sew the bust darts. Fold the bust dart downwards and iron flat. Next up is the shirring. I cut two identical pieces for the shirring panel and sewed them together. Top stitch the seam allowance on one side of the panel for clean finish. Then sew canals or tubes for elastic. The width of the canal depends on the width of the elastic. I sewed 5 tubes, but less is okay too if you have wider elastic. Add the elastic to the canals. You get the measurement for elastic by subtracting the measurement of your waist from the pattern's waist measurement. Be careful when adding the elastic to not lose the other end. To prevent this, pin the end in place. When you've added all the elastics, top stitch the sides to keep them in place. Next, join the front panels together. If you want to add lace to the seams, now's the time. Now the front is ready. Move on to joining the back panels together. Remember to leave seam allowance to the top edge and sew them in place. Now the back is ready too. The next step is to sew the front and back together from the right hand side, leaving the left side open for zipper. Now you have the bodice piece ready. Now is a good time to try the bodice on. I pin it to my shirt to ease the try on and pin the side together. The front of the bodice is too big on me, so I will take in from the front side panels. Also, the armhole area needs to be adjusted, so I roughly pin the shape on the bodice. Carefully remove the bodice, leaving the marking pins on. Then measure how much needs to be taken in from both sides and use the mean of the two measurements. Then unpick the side seam and sew the right hand side again. Fold the same amount on left side and try the bodice on again. Mark the needed adjustments again. In my case, the bust was now okay, but the waist was still too loose. At this point, I was sure enough on the armholes placement and cut the excess fabric off from both sides. Try to make them as identical as possible. Then finally, I took in the side seams from the waist. Next up is finishing the bodice seams. I used zigzag stitch. After stitching all the seams, I decided to add the lace detail onto the lacing panel sides. I top stitched it in place instead of sewing it between the panels because it was so thin. Then I zigzag stitched the top edge and the end of the bodice. Fold the top edge of the bodice and sew it in place. Sewing the curved parts neatly can be quite demanding, so go slowly. Then I added the lace by top stitching it in place. Then lastly, zigzag stitch the bottom edge of the bodice. Remember to pull the fabric straight when stitching the shirring part. Now we move on to the skirt. My waist measurement is quite petite, so for me 2 widths of the fabric is enough. I usually use at least 3 times my waist measurement to get enough volume. I always cut off the selvage because it can shrink in the wash differently from the rest of the fabric. Start off by sewing one of the sides together. Next, zigzag at the ends and the top edge of the skirt. Then sew 2 gathering stitches to the top edge. Gathering stitches are sewn with long, a bit loose straight stitch. Then take the lower threads of the both stitches and carefully start pulling and hence gathering the skirt. Around halfway through you can start gathering from the other end too. Gather the skirt until it measures the same as your bodice's waistline. Then sew the bodice and skirt together, right sides against each other. When sewing around the shirring, remember to pull the fabric straight to give ease to the skirt too. You can even the gatherings while you sew. Try to get the side seams meet. After this, unpick the gathering stitches for a clean finish. You're almost ready. Let's sew on the zipper. Place the zipper with the bodice right sides against each other and sew in place. Then turn the dress inside out and pin the other side of the zipper in place. Pin the waist seam onto the zipper to make the waist seams meet. And sew the zipper in place. Move on to the skirt of the dress. Sew the side seam of the skirt together. Try to pull the tail of the zipper out of the while sewing. Then finish the top ends of the zipper by folding the ends like so and hand sew them in place with a couple of stitches. Then it's time for the straps. I got two 48 by 5 cm pieces and folded them like this and top stitched them in place. You can also sew the straps right sides against each other and turn them inside out if that's easier for you. Then I stitched the lace details onto the straps. Pin the straps in place and try on the dress to adjust the length of the straps. Then sew the straps in place. Then all we need to do is finish the hem of the skirt. I added lace to the hem by sewing it in place, then zigzag stitching the raw edges together and top stitching the seam allowance upwards. For decoration, I added a thin ribbon to the lace and hand stitched the ends together and burned them to prevent them from fraying. The dress is now ready. However, I decided to add lining to the dress because in my opinion JSK was lacking structure and was not clean enough on the inside. I did it by sewing identical bodies except from this shirring panel and hand sewing it in place. Sew around the two big pieces, leaving a small opening and turn them inside out. And sew the gap shut. Fold the bow piece and the tail piece until you are happy with how they look. Then slightly open the fold closest to the bottom of the bow and scoot the tail piece's top fold in the crease and pin it in place. Sew along the long edge of the middle piece and turn it inside out. Wrap it around the bow and turn the raw edges underneath and sew it in place. At this point you can still adjust the bow a bit, and when you're happy, sew the middle part to the bow with a couple of stitches. You can now sew the bow onto the dress or sew a brooch pin onto the bow for more styling options.
So you are done with the dress, or I am done with the dress. I hope you have had a lovely time watching me do it, or if you're doing this yourself, I hope you're having a wonderful time sewing your own dress. Let me know in the comment section down below whether if you had any troubles. If you did, let me know in which part so that in the future I can make my content better and just really like focus on the parts that you find challenging, because that helps me to understand which are like the hard parts. Because for me, because I have been sewing for multiple years already, it might be a bit difficult to understand and like remember the parts that were challenging to me and that might be challenging to you. So let me know in the comment section down below how you would improve this video, and show me some pictures of your dresses that you have made. I would love to see them. I think this project has been really fun. I have really enjoyed sewing them because I haven't really been sewing for like this year almost at all, because I moved into our bedroom with my computer because I had the internship at the school, so I needed some privacy. So basically my computer had taken control of my sewing table, so I really hadn't had the time to sew. So I'm really happy that now I just took the time to just like push the computer aside and just sew. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you want to see more content like this, and we will see you next time. Bye!